Thank you, and thrilled to really be talking about, how we power forward, because that's what it's all about. It's about progress. It's not like looking back at what we were or thinking of where we're going. It's about this continuous forward motion and continuously learning, evolving, making mistakes along the way. That's a good thing, because when you make mistakes, it means you're trying something new. So thrilled to have this conversation about getting on boards, being on boards, staying on boards, and paying it forward and bringing others with you. So with that, thrilled to see all three of you, Anna, Claudia, and Breen. If we could just all start, tell me who you are, what you do, and your relationship to a board, whether you help people get on boards, whether you've been on a board. And of course, I'm unscripted all the time. I'd love for you to tell me what your superpower is. What's your strength? Because we're going to talk a lot about your differences or what people look for on boards. So Anna, let's start with you.
Oh, me first? Okay.
Yeah, why not? You were giving me this big smile, ready to go.
Hey, ready to go. Thanks so much, and it's really great to be back on this panel. It's you guys are a great bunch. So Anna Catalano, and my relationship with boards is I am a board director. I serve on 4 public boards, 1 private, and 3 nonprofit. So I'm pretty busy. It's kind of a full-time job for me, and during this pandemic, I've been busier than I've been for a long time. The other question you wanted me to answer?
What's your superpower?
My superpower.
What makes you stand out?
So when I started my board career, I decided that the 2 things that I would leverage to say these are the things that I really specialize in that could be an asset for your board is my background is in marketing, and not many boards have marketing people on them. So that's one. And the second is I am ethnic Chinese and I speak Mandarin. So for the boards, the companies that are doing business in China especially, I understand the culture, I've worked there, and I understand the country, kind of, as much as you can understand China these days.
Oh,
thanks.
That's true. Thank you. Claudia, hi.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Great. So very nice to be here again. Thank you for having me back. I am a consultant focused exclusively in special stewards board practice. I've been doing this work for over 20 plus years. Have worked with a number of clients across every single sector and every type of board you could think of, whether it's private equity, family, or public. My superpower, I think, is just my authenticity. I think that's the feedback that I get most, and both with clients and candidates, I feel like honesty is always the best in terms of making sure that you know where you stand in any given situation, and set the right expectations so that we could get to great solutions.
When people sugarcoat and don't tell you the truth, it just spins you in circles, that's for sure. And there's a nice way of telling people honest, giving people honest feedback. Breen.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Breen Sullivan, and I am the founder of The Fourth Floor. The Fourth Floor is an innovative membership community and ecosystem for women. We like to say that we are reimagining the boardroom and also how to support female entrepreneurship in order to create positive change, both in the boardroom, but also on the cap table. So more specifically, we're really trying to democratize access to a certain type of board opportunity, investment opportunities, and other opportunities by leveraging a community-based approach. So through doing that, we're hoping to drive systemic change. Myself, I am a career general counsel, and I've actually built out the legal function for 3 different tech companies. Most recently, I was the chief administrative officer in GC for a private equity portfolio company in the education technology space. That actually has a lot to do with the genesis of the idea for the Fourth Floor. So I suppose, and it also relates to my superpowers. So I will be double answering your question. So in fact, it was through my experience as a legal operator in tech companies, very male dominated, often the only woman in the room at the table, but also inexplicably out of the loop when it came to, say, really cool opportunities with an upcoming startup. And all of that just made me realize there was this incredible access issue for anyone who really is not in the loop or, on the inside. And if there was a way to leverage community and tackle that access problem, we could create credible value. So I think like at the root, I realized as a general counsel, my experience building out these legal functions, I did have a superpower. I had value for a certain type of startup or early stage board, and it wasn't being tapped into, for so many reasons. One, the access reason, other reasons. So I think like you can have a superpower that is something like, general counsel experience, strategic, supporting strategic growth. And then I suppose my other superpower would just be being able to think outside the box and connect the dots there, to see an opportunity.
Well, fantastic. And we're going to come back to thinking out of the box, because you also used the word about the reimagination of boards. So we're going to come back to that because I'm very curious to hear more. But Claudia, before we get started, can you level set on the different types of boards? So let's start with the different types of boards, and then we'll go into how we get on those boards and get a seat on boards.
Certainly, and I think that it's important to think about all the different types of boards that are out there before you decide ultimately what you want to do, because the type of board that you target may better align with your skill set or your interests down the road. But if you think about it, there are a number of different types of boards. Of course, there's the nonprofit boards, which should be very mission aligned for you. And there's so many out there that could use support. That's a great way of starting your board service. The other is, of course, a public company, and these are companies that are listed on stock exchanges. And that implies a very different kind of service. And actually, if you think across all of these, the service is very different. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that as we go on. But public company service does require that the individual have some understanding of what the challenges are that need to be overseen as a director. Then there's private equity board service, which is very different again, because many of the private equity firms are looking for people with very specific capabilities that can help the company achieve their investment thesis. It's not always about taking a company IPO. It's much more about helping the company achieve what the private equity firm is trying to do in terms of their outcome. The other kind of board is a family board. There are many large and small family companies that are in different phases of development that require outside independent advice, and that's another great way to give back and get more involved on the board side. And then lastly, I would just say generally a private company, many do have family roots, but there are others that are just simply not public, but they're not necessarily private equity as well. And again, there are different things associated with affiliation with that kind of group as well.
Thank you. I think that that's very important to set the groundwork, because there are different responsibilities, different compensation packages, different skill sets required. And so, Anna, I'm going to come to you because you're on 4 public boards, on a private board, on a non-for-profit board. When did you join your first board? And so first, let's start. When did you join your first board, and what kind of board was it?
So my first board, actually, I joined when I was still working full-time in London. I joined the board of Aviva. It was an insurance company based in London. And I was on that board for just a couple of years. They went through a restructuring. And then at that time, I was actually leaving London. So I used the opportunity to kind of back off and decided to continue my board career back in the United States. And so my first real board, I would say, was when I came back to the States. It was a public board. It was a company called Hercules. It was a chemical company. And I was 43. And I had left my full-time job. And I tell people I started my board career when I was 43 years old.
Incredible. And how did you get that public seat? Like, what was the process?
So it was really interesting because, and I'll try and keep the story short. I had known a recruiter for over 20 years, and he had first reached out to me when I was in my 20s and was doing, mid-management search for executives at the time. And I wasn't interested in his search that he was doing. I kind of liked where I worked, but we decided we would keep in touch. And so from that day on, whenever Andy was in the city that I happened to live in, wherever it was on the world, he would call me and say, let's grab a cup of coffee. And we got to become very good friends over 20 plus years. And so as I moved up in the corporate world, he moved up in the search world. And he was with a company called Heidrick and Struggles, which is a very big company today. And so Andy was one of the first people I called when I decided to come back to the States and I was thinking about a board career. So I always tell people the first board is always the toughest one to land, and I landed it because I invested in a friendship with someone that I met when I was in my 20s.
And I just want to go back to the conversation that was right before ours. It really, the power of women is relationship. I always say men do deals, women create relationships. And that relationship, you didn't know where it was going to go and what it was going to do. It was a genuine, authentic friendship. And, and that's why you were top of mind. And, we're going to talk about fit and we're going to talk about the interview process in a minute. But I want to go, Bryn, to you, creating this community. I love the name, The Fourth Floor. How are you advising women in getting on boards? How are you creating these matches?
Right. So actually, I love the mention of relationship. One of the documents that we use to help in this process is called the relationship matrix. We created it ourselves. So absolutely agree that we excel when it comes to relationships. And also it's not transactional. It's not swipe left, swipe right. It's not easy to just meet someone tomorrow and then they seat you on their board. This has to progress. It goes through, it can evolve over time, or it does evolve over time. So we created this relationship matrix to help guide our members when they're thinking of initiating these types of relationships with someone. And so it's sort of a playbook and instructions about a way to structure their relationships over time to get ultimately to that director seat. Now granted, we're dealing with smaller companies, so we're really focused at the startup level. So our startups frequently are building out an advisory board first. Sometimes in tandem, they have an advisory board and they'll have independent directors that they're seating. Sometimes they start with an advisory board and the independent directors come later. But growing and nurturing relationships over time is certainly core to what we're doing. We also do a board boot camp where we think it's kind of like the big reframe. This is where we have captive founders, creators, and leaders. We have them go through board boot camp in tandem, and we help them reimagine, reframe, and start to see exactly where they might fit, what they're seeking. And also companies, a lot of times companies don't even know that it's a resource that they have available to them that's actually a pretty valuable commodity just in and of itself, even when you're talking about a small company. So we help them see it that way.
I love that. And we're going to come back to advice, best advice you've got, best advice you gave. But I want to go to you, Claudia, because there's a lot of questions coming in on boards. And one is, what advice would you give to women who have been invited on non-for-profit boards? Is this a good route to broader board experience or not?
I think, so generally my view on nonprofit boards, I've actually served on.
Claudia, will you just talk a little louder?
Oh, okay. My view on nonprofit, as someone who has also served on nonprofit boards, is that I don't think you should do it just for the experience of being on a board. I think it should be aligned with your passion, motivation, and mission. It requires a lot of time and effort, and sometimes does require capital, because many of them are looking for some kind of upfront donation to be part of the board, or looking for your assistance in fundraising opportunities. So if you're going to put yourself in a position to do that, you really want to feel aligned to the mission and can speak about it passionately. Having said that, my experience was actually a great experience, because it was the first time I had served on a large board, and it's much larger than your typical corporate board, but it does teach you how to engage with others in a setting where you're not doing the doing, you're giving the advice. And so understanding that differentiated role is a great way to do it in a nonprofit sense. But I once again, I feel very strongly that you shouldn't do it just because you are looking for board experience. You should really do it because you have a passion for it.
Okay, so let's go to that because, you know, you are helping place people on boards all the time. If you were talking to someone that said, I've been on a not-for-profit board, you know, do you feel that is an advantage to helping them move further along to getting on a public board? Does that experience, you know, because I'm just going to play off of what you said. I'm on a lot of non-for-profit boards because those are passion projects for me. I just care a lot about them. They're not for compensation. They're really for legacy. They're things that matter to me. So if I came to you and said, I want to get on a public board and I had a non-for-profit board on my, you know, resume, would that be a good feather in my cap for, you know, moving ahead?
So I think showing any kind of board experience you have is a positive thing. So it's not necessarily a proxy for you to indicate that you're ready to serve on a public board, but it is good to indicate which things that you're giving your time to, and that they're, you know, and a little, and I would say on your board resume, whatever, I would explain a little bit about the type of organization it is, because nonprofit boards vary so greatly in terms of the size, scale, focus, you know, frequency of meetings, et cetera. So I think it's not a negative, but it's not necessarily the path to a public board. What I think is actually, so in my experience working with some clients, we do highlight that people are on nonprofits, but it doesn't necessarily sway their decision more. I'm disappearing. I don't know if you can still see me, but
we still hear you. You got a booming voice. Whether we can see you or not, we can feel you.
Okay. And so, but what I would say is it has been a proxy in the past is, for example, if you are a general counsel and you're frequently in the boardroom for a public company, or if you're the CFO, or even another function, HR, if you're in the boardroom on a regular basis, those are the types of things that first, you know, public companies look at as potential proxies to somebody's board readiness in terms of understanding what happens in the room.
So let's talk about what happens in the room. And then Ann, I'm coming to you about the interview process, because I'm sure so many of us are curious from your side of getting on the public boards. But before we move forward, Claudia, I'm going to ask you, you know, the percentage of women on public boards is very small. Do you know what percentage that is?
Actually, we've just published we're publishing our Business Steward Board Index. I don't have that in front of me at the moment, but what I will tell you is that of all the new directors that were put on public boards in this past year, 2019, I think it was 47% were women, which is a great leap forward.
Because it was less than 20% before. So I just didn't want to give it an inaccurate number, but it has jumped exponentially. So I would love to say, before we move to Anna, about the process from the role that you play, why have we not seen women on boards? Like, what is holding us back from the selection process? Because there are plenty of us qualified to be on public boards. Why have we, you know, not seen that many women? And now, of course, we are consciously and intentionally making a difference, because we know that women are great on boards and really exponentially add so much value. But what is the problem?
I think it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, you know, when you look at traditionally the composition of boards, it was typically white men from the corporate world, and many many don't have a network of women that they could pull upon as referrals that they could put forward at the time. And so we saw in the executive search space a huge uptick in the work we were doing when the the call to bring on more female diversity really came into play, that boards need to bring us on to help them expand their networking and just get access to more capable women who could serve on board. So that's number one. I think the other thing is, and this is changing yet again, I think boards the board recruitment process, and you could probably talk to this as well, it was a very exclusive process. It was very invitation driven, a lot of vetting before people were even considered. And many times, and I would say this kind of a little bit still remains the case today, boards were reluctant to put on somebody if they didn't have 1 or 2 degrees of separation from that individual, where they could get a personal reference on that individual's ability to serve. So because of that, I think it really kept a lot of women out of the boardroom. Look to today, I see that the access has broadened. I think that the mission has been heard, and there's a lot of support for that. And I do think that boards have opened up the aperture in terms of treating it more like a broader recruitment process than an invitation process. So they're meeting more people. They are expecting to know more about who's out in the marketplace. So it's become a very different process on the recruitment.
Well, that's fascinating, the recruitment process, because that's widening the net versus the invitation process where you invite the people just like you in your little tiny bubble circle. And so, Anne, I'm going to go back to you because the interview process seems daunting, and you have been on, you are now recruited and invited, because once you're on one, you become more visible and there's more awareness around it. But you are on so many boards. Your first interview, if you can go back to that and remember it, from your resume, I don't think, did you just deliver the same resume you would as if you were looking for a job, or did you have to modify it to get on a board? And were there questions that they asked you that you didn't expect? And what kind of questions did you ask? Because one of the things that you taught me last time was fit. Not just them choosing you, but you choosing them is so important. So if you can go back to that moment in time, we all would love to hear about that.
So thanks. And by the way, the number is just over 20% now in terms of women on and that's public boards. I think that's an S&P number. So we still have a long way to go.
That's the number I thought it was. Yes.
Yeah. In terms of what the interview was like, I mean, the interviews are all, they're all a little bit different, but there are similarities. So just about all of the early boards I was on came through recruiters. And it was my relationship with recruiters that actually helped me get my name in front of Nom and Gov committees. And I now serve on Nom and Gov, and I've chaired Nom and Gov committees, so I kind of know how the process works from the other end as well. Generally speaking, so that first interview was for a chemical company. My background was in oil, so it wasn't an adjacency. I'd never had experience in a chemical company, but I had experience in an oil company, so I could spell most of the things that they were talking about. They were mostly interested in my background in China, and they were very interested in my marketing background because they had literally nobody on the board who had marketing background. And they were a chemical company that made specialty chemicals, and they wanted to understand how to better market their product. And so, they did spend a lot of time talking about my executive career and what I had done. And so from that standpoint, I think that is the most important thing on your resume, especially when you're starting out, is highlighting what you know how to do and what you have done. And that's where I would go back to that related question of, is nonprofit board experience important and relevant? I would say to the extent that it adds to your list of things that you know how to do, I think it certainly does. As you said, Shelley, the interview process is, I think it's a two-way process. It's a way for them to decide on if they like you. And it should also be a way for you to decide if you want to be a part of that board. You see these people 4 to 6 times a year. That's all you see them for. And so you got to trust the people that you're going to be serving with, because on a for-profit board, you have fiduciary responsibilities.
Mhm.
It's not just you care about what the company does or the mission. You actually need to trust the people who are looking at the financial books and the audited books and all that. And you need to make sure that you trust them. So one of the questions I always ask when I go to an interview is I ask, what is the voice around the table that you're missing that I can fill? And that question, whether they can answer that and how they answer that, tells me, number one, are they just looking for a woman? And if they're just looking for a woman, I don't want to be a part of that. I spent enough of my career being in the room.
Quota.
Exactly. And the second thing is, do you even know what I bring to the table? Therefore, do you have a recruiting system process for your board that truly recognizes people's skills? And so I think that's a real important question to ask. But I didn't find that there were any kind of stump the speaker questions, no trick questions. People genuinely want to know how you can add value to the boardroom conversation.
And who you are. So I just got a 5-minute warning, which is probably now 3 minutes. So I would love to just quickly go around, and I always love to leave with advice. So Breen, let's go with you. Best advice for women to get on boards and startups, which is your area of expertise.
Sure. Yes, thank you. Okay, so I think most important advice is just not to wait. Don't put your head down and work hard for an entire career and wait until you have that incredibly elite set of skills and experience where you might be a candidate for a public board. Start sooner. So there's no reason that we should wait. We need to get started. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time. There are a wide range of board opportunities that are between, that are not for profit and not public company, but rather the vast middle area. And all of those are board opportunities. They do provide incredibly valuable skills and experience. And the other thing I just want to really point out is that it's a chicken and egg problem, because women and people of color have had zero access to that broad swath of board opportunities in between. That means that we've missed out on an incredible amount of equity in startups. That's a whole lot of money. We've missed out on an incredible amounts of opportunities to propel our own careers forward so that we can achieve those heights necessary to be qualified for a public board seat. So I think it really is a chicken and egg problem, and get started early. Open your mind, think about alternative approaches. Come to the 4th floor, and we have a board seat exchange through our digital platform, and we'll help find you a board seat.
Thank you. And Claudia, best advice?
I would just say to a couple of things. Don't underestimate your own network. Really sit down and think through the influencers that you know and get your word out. Still today, many boards don't necessarily use a recruiter to get an independent director. So your network is important, and use it as effectively as possible. And I think women tend to undervalue their own experience. I think you really need to make sure that you have a crisp and confident story and message that you want to get out into the marketplace about yourself, and say it with confidence, and you'll get there.
Anna.
Two little quick bits. First bit of advice is to be top of mind. Figure out how you can create the relationships in your life and in your career to be top of mind to people who are actually making those decisions, whether they are currently on boards, whether they are in private equity companies making those decisions, or whether they are recruiters. So being top of mind is very, very important. And the second quick bit is make sure you have a real good and short elevator speech for what you are good at doing, so that those people, when they think of you, they know immediately how to sell you to a potential board.
Well, thank you, everyone. I am wrapping. Robert, I do see you in your question, and I think that that's a very good one. Anna just answered. Best advice for next gen is have that elevator pitch. My elevator pitch is all 3 of you women are inspiring. You are leading the way. You are bold, you are brave, you are fearless, and you ask and you get what you're looking for. Anything is possible. You can all end up on boards. Thank you for all the wonderful learnings, insights, and advice. And thank you to Worth for hosting this phenomenal conversation.